Hi, I'm Brother Jake. Now, there are a lot of people out there who think that Mormonism is some sort of super scary cult, but they couldn't be more wrong. Let me explain. But first of all, let's talk about the word cult. According to the dictionary definition, a cult is a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. So, according to that definition, every freaking religion is a cult. So, no big deal. Problem solved. Okay, fine. I may be ignoring the secondary, more popular definition of the word cult that people might be using when they say Mormonism is a cult, which would be something like a relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or sinister. But Mormonism isn't like, a cult either, because we don't even exhibit any of the signs of being a cult, like having a whitewashed version of the religion's origin story and history, or being founded by a charismatic leader who's since been almost deified, or participating in secretive rituals, or having an organized high-pressure recruitment force, or actively discouraging people from questioning the dogmas of the organization and marginalizing people who have doubts. You know what? Why don't we take these one at a time? Sign 1. A whitewashed version of the religion's history. Mormonism doesn't do this at all. We've always been totally transparent about our history. I mean, sure, the way we portray some things might seem a little, different than what sort of appeared to have happened according to the historical record. Like, for example, the fact that all the depictions of the translation of the Book of Mormon published in church materials depict something like this, or this, or this, when, according to eyewitnesses, it was more like this, or, just that. Or the fact that we often hear things like this in reference to Joseph Smith's incarcerations preceding his martyrdom.
He had been issued an arrest warrant on trumped-up charges,
when, in fact, he had been arrested for ordering the destruction of a printing press that had printed unfavorable things about him. But there's nothing sinister about, selectively de-emphasizing stuff in the past. We're just putting our best foot forward. Now, there might be some people that say, but deliberately adjusting historical details to make it easier for people to believe your claims is pretty much the exact definition of whitewashing. But I mean, pretty much every religion has weird stuff in their past, so it's not like we're the only ones doing it. I mean, what do you expect us to do? It's not like when you go on a date, you immediately mention the fact that you still live with your mom, because maybe right after you order, she'll go to the bathroom and then never come back, so then you have to call your mom for a ride home and then start a 3-day Star Trek marathon. I mean, don't get me wrong. Obviously, whitewashing is super bad and you shouldn't do it, but it's not really like a bad thing to strategically present certain information in a certain way if doing so ends up helping people out, right? So since we're trying to help people have faith in God's true church so they can be with their families after they die, and learning certain details about the way things seem to have happened might make it harder to believe, then omitting those details from the narrative really isn't whitewashing. It's just helping people have faith so they can get into super awesome VIP heaven later on. And how can that be a bad thing? Sign 2. A charismatic deified leader. Okay, fine. I'm not going to deny that Joseph Smith had some public speaking and interpersonal skills, but is there anything really wrong with that? I mean, doesn't it kind of make sense that God would choose somebody with leadership to lead his church? Besides, it's not like Joseph Smith ever abused his influence. I mean, yeah, there was this one time when he sent a man away on a proselytizing mission and then married his wife while he was away. And sure, there was this other time when he kind of encouraged a practically 15-year-old girl to marry him by telling her an angel was going to kill him if she didn't. But, that was way back in the 1800s. It was a different time back then. There was no way to know what people were thinking. Besides, we don't even know if these marriages included, sex. Plus, both those people wrote in their diary way after the fact that they were cool with it. So, give Joseph Smith a break. I bet he didn't even want to do it. He was just trying to follow God's commandments. I mean, can you imagine an angel with a sword? I think we're getting off topic. My point is, sure, Joseph Smith may have been a charismatic guy, but we definitely don't think he's like a god or anything. I mean, yeah, we do have kind of a lot of Sunday school lessons about how awesome he was, and held a big celebratory event on his 200th birthday that was broadcast all over the world, and have a chapter in our scriptures that talk about how he was only a tiny bit less awesome than Jesus, and have a hymn specifically singing his praises. And sure, I guess you could say that incorporating things centered around mortal individuals into hallmarks of worship that are otherwise reserved only for the divine, like hymns and scriptures, might implicitly elevate that individual to some sort of demigod status and is pretty close to the definition of deification. But what we're doing is totally different. We're not worshiping him. Worship is when you go through religious rites to show reverence and adoration for something. We're just demonstrating honor and respect by singing hymns and scriptures specifically about him. That's all. Sign 3. Participation in secretive rituals. Okay, fine. I guess we do technically have a set of ordinances that are performed in our super special temples. And yeah, it's true that you're not allowed inside unless you have a temple recommend. And sure, we're kind of explicitly forbidden from talking about what exactly goes on in there in pretty much any detail whatsoever. But even though what I just described is basically the exact definition of a secret, that doesn't mean that it's a secret. It's just sacred. You see, what goes on inside a temple is so special that if we let other people see it, they might make fun of it, which would be a huge bummer for us. Plus, since the temple stuff is so super sacred, God would be that much more PO'd at you if you did end up making fun of it and would probably bust out some really hardcore punishments that would, ruin your life or whatever. So us not telling you what goes on in the temples is really for your benefit if you think about it. We're just trying to protect you from getting, zapped. But that doesn't mean you can never learn about what goes on in the temple. Anyone can go in. They just have to earn a temple recommend by doing all the things that God wants, like going to church every Sunday and believing that Joseph Smith is a prophet and that this is the one true church of God and getting baptized and getting the Holy Ghost and not drinking coffee or tea or booze and not having, except with your spouse and paying all the tithing you're supposed to. So you see, it's not like we're secretive, more like sacredive. Sign 4, an organized high-pressure recruitment force. Mormons don't do this at all. I mean, sure, I guess you could say that the church's force of 80,000 full-time missionaries kind of fits that description, especially since as part of their 2-year service, missionaries are sent to a training facility where they're instructed on how to preach about Mormonism using techniques that closely mirror high-pressure sales strategies. And yeah, I guess you could also say that having the church's PR department produce a documentary for theatrical release about how cool and interesting and diverse our membership is, and then have an apostle explicitly encourage members to attend and share the movie with friends and family to ensure its box office success kind of falls under the definition of high-pressure recruitment too, but it's like this. Imagine you, found a big tree in the middle of a huge field with the most delicious fruit you could ever imagine, just mind-blowingly good fruit. Wouldn't you want to take that super awesome fruit and share it with all your friends and family? That's what we're doing. So when we do stuff like make a self-promotional documentary with a deliberately positive spin or train missionaries to follow sales-inspired commitment patterns to get people to agree to baptism, you got to understand that it's not like we're trying to trick people or anything. We just know that being Mormon is way more awesome than not being Mormon, and we just want to share that with as many people as possible. We just want to share the fruit, man. Sign 5. Actively discouraging doubt and marginalizing people who leave the faith. Now, this one just isn't true at all. Mormonism started because Joseph Smith was willing to doubt the status quo and wanted to find real answers. That's what the first vision was all about. Well, one of the accounts of the first vision anyway. But there's a difference between asking questions and questioning. Asking questions is great. It's how we progress. So when we ask questions like, how can I have greater faith in Jesus? Or how can I know the church is even more true? It opens us up to learn and grow. But when you start questioning, then you might start thinking about things outside the premise that the church and gospel are true and super awesome, and that can cause doubts, which can eventually do apostasy, which means you don't get into super awesome VIP heaven, so it's better not to go down that way. It's like this.
President Thomas S. Monson has counseled us that faith and doubt cannot exist in the same mind at the same time, for one will dispel the other.
Right. Doubt and faith are mutually exclusive. I mean, sure, saying that might seem a little counterintuitive since faith is the evidence of things hoped for but not seen, so it seems like some uncertainty must exist since otherwise it wouldn't be faith as much as knowledge. But, I think the larger point is this.
Doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith.
Exactly. We should doubt our doubts before doubting anything else. That way faith will replace the doubt until we don't have any doubts at all. Except for the doubts we had about our doubts, but those doubts are okay since doubt is bad and faith is good. Except for if you have faith in your doubts, that's bad. Well, it's not bad if your faith is in the doubts of your doubts. It's just bad if you have faith in the doubts that you had about your faith. Does that make sense? Anyway, the point is that even if we do encourage faith and discourage doubts, that doesn't mean that we treat people who leave the faith poorly or think less of them. I mean, granted, it is a little hard to argue that we don't stigmatize those people when we have church leaders getting up in our super cool semi-annual conference meetings and saying things like this.
Studying the church through the eyes of its defectors, Elder Neil A. Maxwell once said, is like interviewing Judas to understand Jesus.
Or this.
One loses his testimony only by listening to the promptings of the evil one. And Satan's goal is not complete when a person leaves the church, but when he comes out in open rebellion against it.
Since by implying that people who leave the church are similar to one of the Bible's most notorious bad guys or an unwitting tool of the devil, we're kind of reinforcing an image that might create a rift of distrust and ostracism between the people who leave and their still believing friends and family, but we only say that because we love them. We love them so much that it makes us really sad that they're going to miss out on all the cool stuff that we'll be getting in Super Awesome VIP Heaven. We just feel really sorry for them in a totally not self-righteous or condescending kind of way at all. That's it. In the end, sure, I guess there are some typical hallmarks of a cult that Mormonism can kind of seem to display, but the real test of whether Mormonism is a cult is this. By their fruits ye shall know them, which means that what something produces is a reflection of what it is. So if cults are bad and Mormonism is a cult, then Mormons would be bad people. But since Mormons are super cool and diverse and awesome and people that are great neighbors that love their families, which you can see in the documentary that we just made about ourselves, then Mormonism can't be bad, which means that it can't be a cult because cults are bad. And yes, that line of logic might seem a bit myopic and more than a bit simplistic, but it's something Jesus said. So, what are you going to do? So you see, not a cult.